Monday Night Raw, Episode 2, January 18th, 1993, from Manhattan, New York. So, we're at the second episode now, and from the jump, much better. A much better episode. Everything was a lot more clear, and there were no squash matches, which I thought was very nice. And it was cool to see actual competition, though it all kind of seemed the same. They managed to push storylines across throughout 1 hour, or in this case, it would be 45 minutes with commercials, right? But anywho, as we go into our second episode of Monday Night Raw, we open with Vince, Rob Bartlett, and Randy Savage ringside. Now, we get a zoom in on Rob Bartlett, and he has a picture, and he is holding the picture to the camera, and he says, "Fight the real enemy." Coming to find out, that picture is a picture of Bobby Heenan. I didn't know it at the time, but I eventually found out as we got more into the match. But he holds up a picture of Bobby Heenan, and he says, "Fight the real enemy." But as soon as that finishes, out comes the Repo Man, and he attacks Randy Savage from behind. Just cheap shot. Lays him out, and then runs away. And that's how we begin our second episode for Monday Night Raw. And then we get into our title sequence. It's taking a little bit getting used to hear the, I guess this would be the new generation opening, but always welcomed, always welcomed. I don't know how long I have with it, but I'll savor each moment, I guess. As we get out of the title screen, we get into our first match of the night, which is Terrific Terry Taylor versus Mr. Perfect. We get the sign lady holding up the Get Raw sign as Vince and Rob Bartlett try to get the tagline of uncut, uncooked, and uncensored over on commentary. So they're still going with this tagline. Something to kind of keep in mind. Bartlett also mentions that if Randy can check on his car outside, there's one point where Randy goes out to run after Repo Man, basically, because he attacked him. So he went to go look for him, which is why we have a two-man desk on commentary, Bartlett and Vince on commentary. So during this first match, Bartlett does mention if Randy can go outside and check on his car. He says he couldn't find a spot and just left it in the front. Bartlett has very, very poor judgment when it comes to parking in front of the Manhattan Center, and possibly New York for that matter, especially in '93. But maybe this could be a little bit of foreshadowing, because some of the things that he mentions that aren't funny, or some of the things that he mentions that are in sort of like one tone, I notice, it's because they're trying to get it over, and he's trying to get it over. Although something else to mention too, Rob Bartlett says he just left the car in the front. They got him from WFAN, if what I read is correct. So why would he park a car outside in front of the Manhattan Center, knowing that he's at least somewhat of an experienced New Yorker? Just something to kind of keep in mind. As Mr. Perfect comes to the ring, and he comes out to the ring, and he gets some fanfare, which I thought was pretty cool. People are behind Mr. Perfect. Based off the cheers, I'm seeing that he is a babyface, so he is a good guy, and he is getting the cheers. As he comes out to the ring, he chucks his towel at the ref. Terry Taylor is already in the ring, and he doesn't get an intro. So it's just Mr. Perfect that gets his intro. And as Mr. Perfect kind of comes into the ring, they kind of jaw jack back and forth to kind of begin their little kerfluffle, if you will. There's a point at the beginning of the match where Terry Taylor and Mr. Perfect have some form of miscommunication, and one of them tries to hit the other one, and the other one tries to hit the other one, but they both hesitate at the same time. So to kind of make up for the small miscommunication, Terry Taylor stops and goes to the ref, and he starts complaining, telling him something to the effect of, I couldn't hear what he said, but something to the effect of, he's playing games, you need to tell him to stop playing games. I thought that was a really good sell job by Terry Taylor, because you can kind of use the rubber part of the pencil to erase the little flub and make it into something, which I think is very cool. Creativity, it shows a little bit of something, which I thought was really nice to see. Macho Man winds up coming back to the commentary table and tries to find his hat, only to be told that Repo Man has it. Repo Man has indeed repossessed Macho Man's hat. So we'll see how far that moves along towards the rest of the episode. During this match, we seem to dip in and out of action and segment as Bobby Heenan calls in during the match. He seems upset because Rob Bartlett tore a picture of him. I mean, I would be as well. But he seems upset that Rob Bartlett tore that picture of him in the opening sequence of Monday Night Raw. So far, there's one thing to notice. Bobby Heenan has yet to step foot inside of Monday Night Raw in the building. So the Manhattan Center, even though technically the last episode he was in the hallway by the elevator, I wouldn't say that counts because he has to get in the actual arena. So Bobby Heenan has yet to enter into the Manhattan Center proper. As we get, this is a call-in segment, so as we get further into the phone call with Bobby Heenan and Vince, there's a certain point where Vince just completely ignores Bobby Heenan and starts calling what's going on in the match. So Bobby Heenan is ignored as Vince is doing this. Also, at the same time, Mr. Perfect has Terry Taylor in a rest hold. All while Bobby Heenan is on the phone and he's pleading, he's begging Vince McMahon. He's he to be heard. He wants someone to hear him. And then we go into a commercial break, which I thought was great because we get a rest hold going into a commercial break. And then when we come out of the commercial break, we don't get them coming out of a rest hold. Instead, we get Terry Taylor getting chopped in the corner by Mr. Perfect. But I do enjoy the moments where we can get the rest hold going into commercial break. It's a staple, I want to say, for wrestling that's televised. I think it's fun. Terry Taylor in this match gets some pretty good offense in, as we do wind up officially coming back to the match from break. Even throwing Perfect outside and giving him a number as he's going back into the ring. As the match continues, Heenan's line comes back in during, I want to say, about the middle part of Terry Taylor getting his heat, and most of that conversation kind of just begins and ends. Heenan does mention that they called him Collect, so I thought that was a little nice callback. Towards the end of the phone call, Heenan says, well, you called me Collect, so you have to fit the bill. So it's interesting. It reminds me of the commercials from the Attitude Era when they had 1-800-COLLECT. This match has something that I thought was pretty cool, and that's a slow build to Mr. Perfect getting his heat back from Terry Taylor. For example, Mr. Perfect will hit Terry Taylor once or two times, about a handful of times, and then get knocked back down, thwarted on his first attempt to gain the advantage in the match. He'll do it again, hit him more than a few times or a handful of times or so, and then get thwarted again. And then eventually they build up to where Mr. Perfect winds up getting over. So a nice slow build for a TV match for people that are watching and seeing the babyface eventually trying to get his heat back. Reminds me very, even though not literally, but just metaphorically, Hogan-esque, the power up, you know? As I was feeling like Terry Taylor was looking like a discount Ric Flair and just a complete lookalike of Ric Flair. I mean, he has the the knee pads look just like Flair's. He has TT on his boots. Ric Flair has RF on his boots. So as I'm thinking he's a discount Ric Flair, the actual Ric Flair comes down ringside. From this, I learned that he's in a feud with Mr. Perfect. This distraction causes Terry Taylor to knock Perfect out of the ring, distracts the ref so that Flair could get some cheap shots in, and Flair winds up rolling him back into the ring to avoid Earl Hebner, to avoid seeing Ric Flair as Ric Flair is walking back down the ramp. Not the ramp, rather, the aisleway. Earl Hebner just starts walking back to the turnbuckle, to the corner turnbuckle, so this way he doesn't see it. I thought that was hilarious. After a perfect plex tease from Terry Taylor, Mr. Perfect winds up reversing it, hits the perfect plex for the pin and the win. But Mr. Perfect is a house of fire, because as soon as he picks up the win, he storms right back, because we know that he's trying to go after Ric Flair. And as he storms back, we get into our first commercial break of the episode. As we come back to our commercial break, we get an image of one of the ring ladies, one of the sign ladies in the ring. And as she's holding up her sign that says Raw, Vince, you hear Vince as we get a close-up on the sign lady. You hear Vince go, "Hello," as she just stares directly into the camera, which then leads us into the Bret Hart IcoPro commercial, which was very nice to see. And it was also cool to see the WWF logo in Titan Towers, the gym that they use. After the IcoPro commercial, we get the Macho Man Slim Jim commercial. Fun fact about the Slim Jim commercial is when Macho Man leaves WWF to go to WCW, he takes the Slim Jim sponsorship with him. So at a time when WWF was in an economic hardship and the Slim Jim money helped, you lose Macho Man and then you lose the Slim Jim. So you just lose and then you lose some more. So after the Slim Jim commercial, we get a Bret Hart promo in ring. So it's an interview. And as he comes out to the ring, he has his old music from, I think, the Super Nintendo games, if I'm not mistaken. But he has no shirt on and he's wearing his Bret Hart jacket with his jeans. And the WWF title. So definitely an interesting image to see of Bret Hart. Shirtless, I don't know why, but he comes out with a mission, and that is to put over the fact that he is going to face Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble, and he's going to beat Razor Ramon at the Royal Rumble. So this is a hype up for their title match at the Royal Rumble. We do find out that it is confirmed again. It's told to us again that Razor Ramon did beat up uh, Owen Hart while he was backstage doing an interview for WWF Mania, if memory serves. Also, mentioned Razor had mentioned that he's gonna slap Bret Hart's 78-year-old dad. So Stu Hart's 78 in 1993. I found that out, and I noticed that that's the trope that they use for Bret Hart. Every single time that they bring him out, what's the one thing that's consistently being told about him to put him down? It's the same thing with Cena. He's burying talent. And in this case, it is Bret Hart and his family. Bret Hart and his dad and mom. Mostly his dad and his mom. There's a certain point during the interview where Bret Hart does say that Razor Ramon is the lowest scum in the WWF. So the bar for scum, the lowest part, is Razor Ramon, according to Bret Hart. There's a certain point where they zoom into the crowd and a male fan has his thumbs pointing down, vigorously pointing his thumbs down. Vince then asks Bret if his strategy at the Royal Rumble is going to be technical, to which Bret Hart says that he's throwing all of that technical stuff out the window, says that the WWF title means that he's the best, and he mentions that he's the toughest, the meanest, and the best, which is a tagline I've never heard before. I don't know how often he's going to be using that. We'll see if he continues on a Monday Night Raw. But there is a fan that's in the stands that has a sign that says, Bret Hart, the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. So we'll see what's going on with these phrases. Let's make it clear for me now, WWF. After the Bret Hart in-ring interview, we get a promo for Headlock on Hunger. But it's with The Undertaker and Paul Bearer, which I thought was ironic, because Undertaker says that no one should starve to death. And I find out that the Headlock on Hunger event will take place January 29th at MSG. So the reason why I think this is interesting is sometimes these things kind of write themselves. And, why not have The Undertaker cut a promo on other people to not starve to death? I think that's ironically hilarious. After the Undertaker Headlock on Hunger promo, we get into our second match of the night, which is Marty Janetty versus a jobber named Glenn Ruth. But this winds up being a very competent match. For a jobber, Glenn Ruth knew what he was doing. He was fairly competent in the ring, which was nice to see because we had a lot of squash matches in the last episode, and I really didn't want to see any more squash matches. But Marty Janetty versus Glenn Ruth. Marty gets an entrance, and as he gets his entrance, we go into a commercial break. And then we come back, and both Glenn Ruth and the Raw Sign Girl are in the ring. Rob Bartlett calls Glenn Ruth Babe Ruth's illegitimate son and asks about his car again. So this is the second time that they do mention his car. Marty Jannetty's tights look like the Fruit Stripes gum. Those gums that you would eat, you would chew for 3 or 4 seconds, and the flavor would last just as about the same time, and then just completely just evaporates. His tights look like the Fruit Stripes gum. Glenn Ruth starts off pretty strong in this match, but he's quickly put down as Marty starts to work Glenn over and establishes himself in the match. He is... I don't know if he's a babyface or a heel, but since he's working a jobber, we're just highlighting his moves because we're trying to get him over some way. to make the match mean more, because HBK still has to defend the title, and he has to defend the title against someone who is somewhat competent in the ring. But as Marty starts to get the upper hand on Glenn, we get a phone call from Shawn Michaels. So there's 2 call-in segments in one show. Haven't seen that. I don't even remember the last time I haven't seen that in a while, I know for sure. I don't remember the last call-in segment that I've ever seen on Monday Night Raw. So this is possibly the first. This is definitely the first time on Raw, because this is only episode 2. But Shawn Michaels does call in during the match. He says that he's always in Marty's head. He also said that he's going to shake Janetty's world, rattle his bones, and roll him out of the Royal Rumble. He also mentions on the phone call that regarding Sherry, for Shawn Michaels, because she's a woman and because all women on Earth are in love with the Heartbreak Kid, she's naturally going to gravitate towards him. So that's why he doesn't have an issue and he's not worried. Thank you, Shawn. This is very good to know. Shawn also puts over the fact that he is the sexiest man alive by saying that he is the sexiest man alive. As the call's about to end, Vince says, "Thank you for your time," and Shawn responds with, "Your pleasure," which is funny. It's witty. It's nice little character stuff. I think that's nice to kind of hear. And as the phone call finishes, we wind up getting back to the action. Marty is pretty much in control for most of the match. Macho Man on commentary does mention his hat again. Marty hits the famouser for the finish and the win. So that is that's Marty's finisher, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know that. But I might remember seeing a video of Marty Janetty spiking a jobber at one point because he didn't know how to take the finisher as a finish. But this was a while ago. I don't know if that's true, but I think I remember seeing something. So it could be that this was indeed his finisher. But Marty gets the pin and the win over Glenn Ruth. Overall, I would say it's a decent match. It's meant to just put over Janetty, but if you want to see a random jobber not do that bad at all in the ring and look like a competent performer, then this could be one of those, not a hidden gem, but a hidden gem. It'll definitely be on a Marty Janetty best of, right? So that's nice. Competent match, swell match, if you will. After the match, we get a Royal Rumble hype package that goes right into commentary, who start talking about the Crush and the Doink feud. So something to consider about this Doink feud, because I said this in episode 1, but this feud started because Crush doesn't like the fact that Doink makes kids cry. So I just want that to be known, because this is how the feud started. So Rob Bartlett speaks, but I don't really understand what he was trying to say. But Rob Bartlett also has a paper that he's looking at while the camera's on them, and he closes and puts down. I got a chance to look up the paper, and it's the January 18th, 1993 New York Post, and the front page reads, Bush's parting shot, U.S. missiles hit Iraq, bon voyage. And at the bottom panel of the front page of the newspaper, it says, Katie's brother knew of Secret Dungeon. I don't know who Katie is, and I guess she must have known about her brother's Secret Dungeon. But this story I do not have any idea about. Then we go into the actual clip, which is from WWF Superstars of Doink and Crush. And Doink's left arm is still in a sleeve, and this is from last week as well. It's a sling. It's still in a sling, and this is the same from the first episode of Monday Night Raw, because he was blatantly showing the fact that his arm was in one. And as we're in the clip, it shows Doink trying to give Crush a flower. I looked up the type of flower that he was trying to give Crush, and it's called the Scarborough Brilliant, allegedly. Crush, this part's interesting. Crush takes the flower from Doink and gives it to a girl in the audience, who then immediately, I don't want to say hands, because she definitely didn't hand it. She kind of just like gave him a, here, you take this, because she wanted to get her hand in on the action that was going on, because in this case, Crush was close to her, but the wrestlers are close to them. So she was more interested in that and not into the flower. So the way she takes it and just hands it to the person to her left, who's probably her relative or something like that. I thought that was pretty funny. But then Crush is hit by Doink with the arm. So it turns out the arm is fake. And it was fake the entire time. Doink was faking an injury. Not only was he faking the injury, the flower, even though he was trying to be nice, was not that nice. It was a ploy to hide the fact that he wanted to beat Crush with a fake arm in a cast. So that's what he did. And as that's going on, we get everybody from the back, the refs and Sergeant Slaughter and Pat Patterson. I think Pat Patterson has a cardigan on, but we get them to kind of come out and stop it, and eventually they do. But towards the end of the clip, as Doink finishes hitting Crush a lot too. Even so, there's some points where Crush isn't selling too well, and other points where he's selling normal. But in the stands, there's a kid who has a foam tomahawk, and he just keeps whacking, or trying to whack Doink, and that's how that clip ends. You see the kid whacking Doink with the foam tomahawk. After that WWF Superstars clip with Doink and Crush, we go into a commercial for WWF Mania, which is on Saturdays. I still have yet to watch an episode, and I don't know if it's on Peacock. So should I choose to seek it out, I will have to find some sort of outlet for my WWF Mania viewing. After the commercial for WWF Mania, we are led back to the commentary table, where Macho Man says that Doink's arm could have been filled with lead. Vince also lets us know that Crush suffered a concussion because of the attack from Doink. So I'm curious to see how that'll affect his Royal Rumble opportunity, if he has one, that is. Rob Bartlett is also eating a Slim Jim as we're looking at the commentary table. Vince also, he gets alerted on his earpiece, and he's told that we're going to go, and he tells us we're going outside to Sean Mooney, who has the Repo Man ready for a quick chat, which then leads us into not a backstage interview, but an outside interview in the middle of January during winter time in New York with Sean Mooney and the Repo Man. This was a hit or miss interview. There's certain times where Repo Man will say something funny, like he repossessed Macho Man's hat due to late payment. I don't know how that payment process will work. Uh, and then eventually they go back and forth with one another. But then also there's certain points in the interview where Repo Man is stepping away, not stepping away, but moving back and forth from the microphone, so you kind of can't hear him when he says certain things. I think it happens like 3 or 4 times. Also, the funny part throughout this entire interview is that towards the end, Repo Man is just completely and utterly drooling down his chin. And it glistens because of the lights at the Manhattan Center. So you just see a bunch of drool visibly coming down from from his chin. This interview is just to kind of set up the feud between Macho Man and Repo Man. So hopefully we'll see a match soon. After the interview with Repo Man, we get the Royal Rumble report hosted by Mean Gene Okerlund, which is sponsored by IcoPro. I don't know what their involvement was with IcoPro, but they got the banner in the arena, and they got the Royal Rumble report is sponsored by IcoPro. But the Royal Rumble report, it starts off with the main event, which is Bret versus Razor for the WWF Championship. And that leads right into a Razor promo. After our Razor Ramon promo, it goes right into a recap of the participants. During this recap, I find out, for the first time at least, when I was watching it, that Money Inc. is still around. We also get a Intercontinental title hype package as well, which is Shawn Michaels versus Marty Janetty. And whose side will Sensational Sherry be on? Also, Royal Rumble is in Sacramento, so that's something to note as well. After our Royal Rumble report, which was sponsored by IcoPro, we get a hard cam shot of the crowd, and someone has a Macho Man wrestling buddy, which I thought was very nice. Then we go right to commentary, and it's just Rob and Vince, and so no Macho Man for the time being. But fear not, as soon as we cut outside, we have Macho Man running out, as we see Sean Mooney. While Macho Man's outside, I noticed that there's a cab that has an advertisement for Bally's Grand. So I think that was or is a hotel in Atlantic City, because of course WWF did WrestleManias at Trump's places, and they had, even to this day, they have some form of relationship up to Linda McMahon being in Donald Trump's presidential cabinet. Also, Macho Man wants to fight, and Macho Man is he's not seething, but he's rearing to fight Repo Man. This hat thing like really hurt him a lot. So Repo Man did a bad thing, and now Macho Man is not happy. Then we fade into the ring girl holding up a sign that says "That wasn't nice." But what happens is you have to flip the sign. So if it's front facing, you have to flip it upside down. So this way the words on the back of the sign, which are upside down, will be right side up. But the hard cam mostly captures her back turned to us, and also it also captures the back of the sign, and in this case the letters are upside down. So I thought that was I thought that was pretty funny as well. After the ring girl and her upside down sign, we go into our final match of the evening, which is Tito Santana versus Ric Flair. Uh, at the beginning, Rob Bartlett starts by saying that Tito Santana lost his job driving Zoe the bear. I didn't understand the reference, uh, but that's what Rob Bartlett said. And this is all happening as Tito's kind of coming into the ring. As we get Tito coming in, we see that he's almost, he's at ringside and he's about to come into the ring. So that's when Rob Bartlett says his reference that escapes me as Tito's coming in. And then Flair comes out, which I thought was a very smooth entrance. You know, Flair really takes his time and he's very methodical, and you really, he makes you appreciate just his entrance alone. There's a lot of like spectacle, even though he doesn't even have to do too much. Macho Man winds up returning to commentary, and while on commentary, Vince tells us that Bret Hart is staying in New York because he is scheduled to go on live with Regis and Kathy Lee on Wednesday, so in 2 days from that day. Now we get to the match, and Tito begins to get his heat using rest holds to tire out Ric Flair. He really wants to wear him down, and I noticed that he successfully stopped 2 attempts by Ric Flair for Flair to gain his momentum, and Tito brought him back down with headlocks. So anytime when Flair was trying to get his heat, kind of like in the Perfect match, it was thwarted by in this case, in that case it was a babyface. In this case it was the heel. So you kind of see, maybe it's a trend, but I noticed in both of the matches we get the beat down, get your heat, beat down, get your heat, beat down, get your heat, keep your heat, and then, you know, that, but that's towards the end. So we kind of see a sort of template, if you will, for matches. And I guess who's going to win in that case? So I'll keep a lookout for if this is the case. Whoever is getting more offense in at the beginning will most likely lose at the end. Let's see if that becomes a trend as I continue watching more Raws. A headlock takedown by Tito Santana, and we get a rest hold going into a commercial break. This is fantastic. Another rest hold going into a commercial break. But don't get too excited, because as we come out of the commercial break, we get a shot of the audience and no rest hold, but a reverse Irish whip into the turnbuckle by Tito Santana. Now, Flair finally gets his offense in, and we are pretty much off to the races at that point. Flair, I notice, is a very... Well, he is the dirtiest player in the game, right? So he fights by any means possible. He gets an eye poke in. Tito Santana's at the turnbuckle, and he gets some short closed fist punches at the turnbuckle. Tito Santana gets a Flair knee drop. And while all that is going on, Flair even has time to yell at the commentary table at Randy Savage, and he says, "I'm talking to you." And then he winds up going back and then hitting Tito with another knee drop, as commentary lets us know that next week on Raw we'll see Macho Man versus Repo Man. So after, once we get to the second Flair knee drop, we're told on commentary, Macho Man gets his match, which is good. So now he can avenge. We have a match set up for next week, something to look forward to, and it's a quote-unquote rivalry, right? The one thing I noticed is there's a difference in offense between the two. Tito moves around and takes his time to wear his opponent down, whereas Flair fights by any means necessary, right? Dirtiest player in the game. And he fought like that in this match too. to in some way, shape, or form. It's also kind of a difference from their entrances, as when Tito came to the ring, he had more of an upbeat vibe, and he's coming in and establishing himself in the ring by kind of just like getting loose and moving around, right? Whereas Flair, his entrance is more methodical. He wants the audience to soak him in as he slowly grabs the audience's attention. So a contrast uh, in styles in more ways than one. Flair and Tito go back and forth trying to gain the upper hand until Flair gets thrown out of the ring by Tito. Then he gets thrown back into the ring by Tito, and in an attempt to run after him, Tito hits the ropes and Flair dodges a cross-body attack. Tito eats it, flies completely out of the ring. Then, as that happened, Mr. Perfect comes out, and Flair and Mr. Perfect fight each other. And it's a real mess at this point. The refs come out, and Sergeant Slaughter comes out, Pat Patterson comes out. Pat Patterson comes out with the cardigan on, a must-see cardigan in my opinion. I thought it was hilarious. When they're at ringside, Pat Patterson gets shoved by Ric Flair, and his sell is hilarious, but he gets shoved for his trouble. This thing goes back and forth, pretty much where they're kind of just like fighting each other. So the match doesn't necessarily get thrown out because a bell didn't ring, but the match is just stopped because there's just anarchy going on. They're really trying to get over the fact that they don't like each other, because this is one of those pull-aparts, if you will. These are heated rivalries when you have to constantly, you need people to hold you back, right? So the match is kind of just ended, and Flair and Perfect and all of the other stagehands, they all go backstage behind the curtain. They fight backstage. From the ring, they go back, and as everybody is kind of just like going back, the curtain closes. And at one point, you see one of the stagehands. He puts his hand out to fix the curtain, so that this way the camera doesn't pick up anything in the back. But then, as soon as he finished doing that, you see Tito being held by the ref. He has his arm around. Tito has his arm around him, and he's somewhat taller than the ref. So the stagehand went to go fix the curtain, but then it's just to fix that little bit of space, but then it's completely wide open by Tito Santana and a referee going backstage as well. So I thought that was pretty funny, and something that you like, those little things that you notice. And then we wind up going into a commercial break. When we come back from our commercial break, the Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect fight leaks back outside. So it seemed as if the fighting did not stop, and it continued backstage through commercial. As they were getting paid for advertisement, fighting was happening. And then once they come back from being paid from advertisers, we get fight. So that fight leaks back out to ringside, but really that fight is just to set up an interview with Ric Flair. Now this is a interesting interview, because it's a very hyped up Ric Flair. As soon as he walks up to Vince, the first thing that he tells him is, "You don't talk to me." And indeed, Vince did not say a single thing to Ric Flair. So Vince listened. Flair says that the WWF is not big enough for the both of them. And then at one point he yells, "I want perfect!" And then pitches a loser leaves the WWF. This is after kind of talking, getting his wind back, getting his breath back, and then kind of coming back. Because at one point I thought he was about to leave and finish the interview, but he doesn't. He kind of just walks around, catches his breath, and then eventually pitches a loser leaves the WWF match. Oh man, we'll see what happens. As Flair leaves, Vince is explaining something to us, and then he says the phrase "retort of some sort," which I thought was pretty nice. Also, one thing to note: Flair says in that interview that Perfect can never say that he beat Ric Flair. So I thought to myself, I said, "Oh, foreshadowing, maybe." Also, I have for this match, I have a Ric Flair unsuccessful top rope move counter, and so far we are at 1 on Monday Night Raw. So as we go from the Ric Flair interview, we then get the Mr. Perfect interview. So they fight each other, they go backstage, they come back outside. There's enough time for Ric Flair to do the interview, and now there's enough time for Mr. Perfect to do an interview as well. I thought that was, in wrestling, right? So this leads into a Mr. Perfect interview where he does talk with Vince, and Vince does get to say words to Mr. Perfect. Big difference from interviews. This was a really interesting sort of sell about the idea of the loser leaves WWF, and Perfect accepts the challenge, and he does a really good job selling the idea that this type of match is just now being pitched, because we know in kayfabe, yes, but we know backstage that this is spoken about at some point prior. Even if it's 15 minutes prior to their segment, it's still spoken prior to, this is, spoken about and gone through to some degree. And at this point, I think they're booking like a little bit longer and in advance compared to today, where they're kind of doing sometimes at the 13th hour. So Mr. Perfect selling the fact that this he's just hearing about this now, I thought was pretty cool. The way he sells it, he seems like he's coming from a place where, as he thinks more and more of the idea, he thinks more and more of of what the opportunity is, and how the opportunity could lead to potential bigger match options, better match options, more quality, or a higher spot on the card. If I was thinking as Mr. Perfect, but also thinking as kayfabe, in kayfabe as well, with kayfabe in mind, without knowing too much about future history, right? So as Perfect leaves to some fanfare. The crowd are cheering for him, and he gets the camera held on him as he's walking out for a couple of seconds. So they're putting over. He's accepted the challenge, so this could potentially be the last time that you see. One of the last times that you could see Mr. Perfect within a WWF capacity. Unless he does something at the Royal Rumble where he's not, there's no real stakes on the line. So something to kind of keep in mind, and I guess they were trying to show us that by keeping the camera on him a little bit longer, a couple seconds more, 5, 6 seconds I noticed. But then as we get Perfect leaving, we cut right into the last segment of the show, which is the Repo Man is outside, and he has a tow truck and a car that's being towed. And as we see the Repo Man and the image of and the car and the repossessed car, the Repo Man has now possessed two things on one episode of Monday Night Raw. And Rob Bartlett says, "Hey, that's my car." So the storyline at the beginning where Bartlett asks if Randy sees his car because he parked it outside, it wraps up at the end of the episode because it's repossessed by the Repo Man. So we get the hype for the Macho Man Repo Man match, which was confirmed on this episode for next week. We get the Loser Leaves WWF match next week between Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect. We also get fallout from the Royal Rumble, so we'll see what happens on Monday post Royal Rumble because it's the next night. And this episode also put over the Marty Janetty HBK feud going into the Rumble. It put over Flair Perfect because both had matches and they both interfered in each other's matches. It gave us the Bret Hart Razor Ramon promo because Razor had, during the Royal Rumble recap, Razor had a promo. Bret Hart had an in-ring interview, I think so. Yeah, Bret Hart had an interview, so that storyline gets pushed because that's the title match for the Rumble. So decent story build, decent building of story in the second episode, much better than the first one. The main feature on this show was Macho Man and Repo Man, whereas last week was Doink the Clown. Also, something to note, which is why we hold our breath from the start. Now I'm learning to hold our breaths because on the first episode of Monday Night Raw, they said that Woody Allen was going to face Mia Farrow in a steel cage match. And not only did it not happen, it wasn't even mentioned in this match, in this show. The match was not even mentioned. It wasn't even talked about. So don't hold your breath too much, folks, because they told us a match was going to happen and it didn't happen. So decent match overall, pretty good. Decent matches, rather. Pretty good to watch. A better episode, better quality episode, and quality matches too. And you get to see a random Glenn Ruth appearance with quality, with competent wrestling. And everybody looked fairly decent overall. Even Terry Taylor, the discount Ric Flair, looked fairly decent. And Tito Santana and Flair was pretty interesting. Also really good for Tito to get into the ring with someone like Ric Flair, who at that point was... Flair goes back to the 70s, so, you know, this is almost 20 years of experience at that point. So really cool to kind of see all that. And that's pretty much about it for the second episode of Monday Night Raw. Royal Rumble Fallout, and then episode 3. So we'll see what winds up happening.